Imagine taking your daughter to the park, and after 7 years of complete silence, she suddenly speaks her very first word, because of a stranger with a guitar. A millionaire thought he had seen it all, but nothing prepared him for this moment. "Daddy, why can't I speak like the other kids?" Those words had never left Lily's lips. For 7 years, her silence had been the loudest sound in David's life. His daughter had never said hello, never called him daddy, never laughed out loud like the children he saw on playgrounds. Doctors labeled it selective mutism, a condition that made her physically capable of speaking, but unable to bring her voice out when she wanted to. Therapists told him to be patient. Teachers reassured him that one day it might change. But time only made the silence heavier and more painful. David was a millionaire, a man who could bend the business world to his will, yet he was powerless when it came to his daughter's voice. He had poured fortunes into specialists, tutors, and treatments, but nothing broke the wall of silence around her. At night, he often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking himself the same haunting question: what am I doing wrong as a father? He gave Lily everything money could buy. The best doctors, the most expensive toys, even a playroom designed with colors and textures recommended by therapists. But none of it mattered. She still clung to her teddy bear like it was her only friend, using drawings and gestures to say what her lips never could. The hardest moments were when she watched other children. Her eyes followed them with longing, and David could almost hear the questions she never voiced. Why can't I be like them? Why am I different? Each time, it broke his heart a little more. Deep down, David carried a guilt he couldn't admit to anyone. Maybe her silence wasn't just a condition. Maybe it was his fault. He worked long hours, buried himself in deals, and missed far too many dinners and bedtime stories. Too many nights he had come home late, finding her asleep with her teddy tucked under her chin. Perhaps she had stopped trying to speak because the one person she wanted to talk to the most was hardly ever there. That guilt weighed on him more than all the millions in his bank account ever could. One Saturday, determined to change something, he cleared his entire schedule. No meetings, no calls, no emails. Just him and Lily. When he asked her if she wanted to go to the park, she didn't answer. She rarely did. She only hugged her teddy bear tighter and stared at him with those wide brown eyes. Then, after a pause, she nodded. That tiny nod meant the world to him. The walk to the park was quiet, as always. Lily's small hand slipped into his larger one, and though she didn't speak, David felt the weight of her trust. The park was alive with laughter when they arrived. Children ran across the grass chasing kites, their voices filling the air. Parents chatted on benches, babies squealed in strollers, and the breeze carried the carefree joy of family moments David longed to have with his daughter. He lifted Lily onto a swing and pushed her gently. She held her teddy close, legs dangling, eyes fixed on the children around her. She didn't laugh, but David noticed the way she studied them, as though memorizing every sound, every movement. He sat on the bench, heart heavy, wondering if he would ever hear her voice. Would she ever call him Daddy? Would he ever know the sound of her laughter? And then it happened. A man entered the park, and something about him made David notice immediately. He wasn't dressed fancy, just a worn jacket, jeans, and shoes that had seen better days. His skin glowed under the afternoon sun, and slung over his back was a guitar. His walk was unhurried, almost peaceful, as if the chaos of the world didn't touch him. He smiled at the children, who instinctively smiled back, though none of them knew him. David watched curiously as the man settled under a large oak tree, set the guitar across his lap, and began to play. The sound that came from those strings was unlike anything David had ever heard. It wasn't loud or showy. It was soft, warm, and full of life. It wrapped around the park like sunlight, drawing children closer one by one. They abandoned their games and gathered around him, clapping their hands, swaying with the rhythm, their laughter blending with the melody. But David didn't see the other children. His eyes were fixed on Lily. For the first time, she leaned forward on her swing. Her teddy slipped slightly from her grip as her wide eyes locked onto the man with the guitar. Something in his music pulled her in, like invisible threads wrapping around her heart. David's breath caught as her lips parted. He blinked hard, unsure if his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But then he saw it clearly. She mouthed something. No sound, not yet, but the shape of her lips was undeniable. The man began to sing, his voice deep but gentle. "Hello, little star, I see you shining bright." And then it happened. The moment David had waited 7 years for. From Lily's lips came the faintest sound, fragile and hesitant, like a bird learning to sing. One single word slipped out, carried on trembling breath. Light. David froze. His entire body went numb. His heart thundered in his chest. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, he couldn't believe it. His daughter had spoken. For the very first time in her life, she had spoken. And she hadn't spoken to him, or to a doctor, or to a teacher. She had spoken to a stranger. A man with dark skin, a warm smile, and a guitar. David couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was stare, his eyes filling with tears, as the miracle he had prayed for unfolded right before him in the most unexpected way. The man settled under a large oak tree, unpacked his guitar, and began strumming. His music was gentle, rich, and filled the air like magic. Each note seemed to float, wrapping itself around the laughter of children, blending with the rustle of leaves, and sinking deep into the hearts of everyone who heard it. Slowly, children gathered around him, clapping, swaying, and singing along. Parents smiled from the benches, grateful for the unexpected joy. But David noticed something far more important. Lily wasn't just watching. She was leaning forward, eyes wide, completely drawn in. His little girl, who usually shrank back into herself, who clutched her teddy bear like a shield, was now sitting at the very edge of her swing. Her grip on her toy loosened, and her tiny body tilted as though the music was calling her closer. Her face, so often blank and guarded, was suddenly alive with curiosity. David's heart began to race. In all the years of therapy sessions, private tutors, and carefully designed games meant to encourage speech, he had never seen Lily this engaged. Not once. She had never looked at another person like this, like she was ready to step out of her shell. The man glanced up from his guitar, eyes twinkling as though he noticed her too. His smile was warm, patient, and kind. Then, with a small nod to the circle of children, he began to sing. His voice wasn't perfect, but it carried something better, comfort. "Hello, little star, I see you shining bright. Don't be afraid, the world is full of light." The words floated across the grass like a lullaby. The children clapped in rhythm, some singing along. But David's world narrowed to one single image, Lily's lips moving. At first, he thought it was nothing. Maybe she was mimicking silently, the way she sometimes mouthed words from cartoons or songs without ever letting a sound out. He rubbed his eyes, convinced he was imagining it. But then he saw her chest rise, her throat tremble, and before he could prepare himself, he heard it. A sound. Not much. Fragile, almost breaking. But it was real. A word, soft as a whisper, barely louder than the breeze. Light. David's entire body froze. The air around him seemed to vanish, and for a moment he couldn't even breathe. His daughter had spoken. After 7 years of silence, 7 years of waiting, praying, and aching, Lily had spoken. And she hadn't spoken to him. Not to a therapist, not to a doctor, not even to herself in the mirror. She had spoken to a complete stranger sitting under a tree with a guitar. David's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the bench, his vision blurring with tears. He wanted to shout, to run, to fall to his knees in gratitude, but he didn't dare move. He was terrified that if he reacted, if he made a sound, it would break the spell, and Lily would retreat back into silence. The man kept singing, his voice carrying another line. "Hello, little star, you make the dark so bright." And there it was again. "Bright," Lily whispered, the word shaky, unsteady, but unmistakable. David's heart nearly burst. 2 words. 2 words after years of nothing. He wanted to scoop her up, to hold her close and cry into her hair. But he stayed rooted to the bench, watching, afraid to disturb the miracle unfolding before his eyes. The children clapped again, and Lily clapped too. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just an observer. She was a participant. Her face lit up, her eyes sparkled, and when the man strummed another tune, she leaned forward eagerly, whispering the words as best she could. Each sound was like a drop of water in the desert, and David drank in every single one. He whispered to himself, his voice breaking, "She's speaking. My little girl is speaking." Other parents began to notice too. They looked around, realizing what was happening, some even covering their mouths in shock. A few clapped louder, encouraging Lily, though none of them truly understood the magnitude of the moment. Only David did. Only he knew that this was the very first time in 7 years that his daughter had given her voice to the world. And then something happened that nearly brought him to his knees. Lily turned her head. Slowly, carefully, she looked at him. For the first time, her lips formed a word not for the stranger, not for the song, but for her father. Daddy. It was faint, trembling, but it was there. The word he had longed for, prayed for, dreamed of. 7 years of waiting, and now here it was, slipping from her lips like the most precious gift in the world. Tears poured down David's face. He couldn't stop them. He didn't care who saw. He had built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, commanded boardrooms filled with powerful men, but nothing in his life had ever made him feel so small, so humbled, so blessed as hearing that one word from his daughter. He wanted to run to her, but his legs felt weak. His heart felt too big for his chest, like it might burst at any second. He pressed a hand to his mouth to keep from sobbing aloud, terrified of interrupting the fragile miracle. The man with the guitar met his eyes, and in that moment, David understood. This wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. Somehow, this man had reached into his daughter's heart and unlocked something no one else could. When the song ended, the children cheered. Lily clapped, smiling wider than David had ever seen. For once, her teddy lay forgotten in the sand, because for the first time in her life, she didn't need it. She had her voice. David slowly rose, his legs unsteady, and walked toward her. When he crouched down, Lily looked up at him with eyes that glowed with pride. She whispered again, clearer this time, "Daddy." And David pulled her into his arms, sobbing openly as the world around him blurred. He didn't care about the stranger watching or the family staring. All he cared about was that the silence was finally broken. His daughter had spoken, and his life would never be the same. David's heart raced. He wanted to cry, to shout, to scoop Lily up in his arms and never let go. But he didn't move a muscle. He was terrified that if he spoke, if he even breathed too loudly, the magic would vanish, and she would slip back into silence. For 7 long years, his daughter had been locked inside her own world, and now, her voice was finally breaking through. He could hardly believe his ears. The man strummed his guitar again, his fingers moving effortlessly across the strings. The melody rose and fell like sunlight breaking through clouds. His voice was steady, calm, almost coaxing. "Hello, little star, don't hide away tonight." Lily's lips trembled, and then she repeated the word in her tiny, fragile voice. "Shine." David's chest tightened. He had to bite down on his lip to keep from crying out. He could see it, her fear, her hesitation, but also her determination. She wanted to match the music, to release the sounds that had been trapped inside her for so long. The man played another line, slower this time, and Lily followed. Bright. The word was clearer than the last, her voice unsteady but gaining strength. David's vision blurred as hot tears filled his eyes. All the late nights sitting by her bed, all the prayers whispered into the dark, all the moments when he wondered if he'd ever hear her call him Daddy. They all rushed back at once. The children around them erupted in laughter and clapping, delighted that Lily was joining their song. They didn't know her story. They didn't know that this was the very first time she had spoken out loud in her life. To them, it was just another little girl singing along. But to David, it was everything. He stood frozen, his whole world spinning. After years of silence, his daughter wasn't just speaking, she was singing. Each syllable was like a miracle, a gift he never thought he would receive. And all because of this stranger, this man with dark skin and kind eyes, who had wandered into the park with nothing but a guitar and a smile. Lily swayed gently on her swing, clutching her teddy bear with one hand while her other reached forward, as though reaching for the music itself. Her eyes glowed, her cheeks flushed with joy, and her lips moved again. "Hello." The word was soft, broken, but it was there. David's breath caught in his throat. She had said hello, not mouthed it, not whispered it in a dream. She had spoken for real, and the sound was sweeter than anything he had ever heard. He wanted to fall to his knees. He wanted to thank the heavens, to thank this man, to thank anyone who would listen. But he stayed rooted in place, terrified that the moment would shatter if he interfered. And then it happened. Lily turned her head toward him. Slowly, as if gathering every ounce of courage inside her, she looked right at him. Her lips quivered, her chest rose, and then, with a soft but steady voice, she whispered the word he had longed to hear for so many years. Daddy. The world stopped. David's knees buckled, and he almost collapsed onto the grass. That one word, just 2 syllables, held more weight than all the riches he had ever earned. His throat closed, and tears spilled down his cheeks faster than he could wipe them away. He had waited 7 years for this moment. 7 years of silence. 7 years of hoping. 7 years of wondering if he would ever hear his little girl speak to him. And now here it was. His name. The name only she could make sound like the most beautiful music in the world. Daddy, she whispered again, this time a little clearer, a little stronger, as though she was testing the sound. He couldn't hold back anymore. His hands trembled as he dropped to his knees in front of her, his face wet with tears. Yes, sweetheart, he choked out, his voice breaking. Daddy's here. I'm right here. Lily smiled, a smile brighter than the sun itself, and for the first time in her life, she looked free. No longer trapped behind silence, no longer hidden away in her own world. She was speaking, connecting, reaching out. And she had chosen him, her father, to give her most precious word to. The children around them cheered again, clapping for the song, not knowing they had just witnessed a miracle. Parents on nearby benches turned, some with tears in their eyes, though none of them could truly understand the depth of what had just happened. Only David knew. Only he knew the years of waiting, the nights of aching, the endless guilt and hope that had led to this single moment. The man with the guitar strummed a final chord, his song fading gently into the breeze. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He simply watched, smiling softly, as though this had been his intention all along. David pulled Lily into his arms, holding her close, his tears soaking her hair. She hugged him back tightly, teddy bear squished between them. Her small voice murmured again against his chest, Daddy. He closed his eyes and let the word echo through his soul, knowing he would never forget it for as long as he lived. And in that park, surrounded by strangers, David realized that no amount of money, no amount of success, no empire he could ever build would compare to this moment. The only treasure he truly needed was the sound of his daughter's voice. The man smiled warmly, his voice as gentle as his music. My name's Marcus. I used to be a speech therapist. But I learned something the textbooks don't teach. You can't force a child to speak. You have to make them feel safe. Music breaks down walls, words can't. David's throat tightened. His whole body trembled as he stared at the stranger before him. He thought of the endless visits to specialists, the charts, the exercises, the expensive programs that had all failed. He thought of Lily sitting silently in brightly lit offices, her eyes pleading, her teddy bear clutched like a lifeline, while doctors jotted down notes. He had done everything money could buy, but none of it had freed her voice. And yet here was this man, with nothing but a worn guitar and a smile, unlocking what years of science, therapy, and wealth had not. In mere minutes, Marcus had given him something priceless, his daughter's words. David's voice broke as he whispered, Thank you. You've given me a miracle. But Marcus shook his head slowly, still strumming a faint, thoughtful tune. No, sir. I didn't give you anything. Your daughter always had this voice inside her. She just needed a reason to let it out. All I did was show her that it's safe, that her words can bring joy, not fear. David's tears spilled freely now, hot against his cheeks. He lowered his gaze to Lily, who was still swaying on the swing, her small body leaning toward Marcus's guitar. Her lips curved into a shy smile, her eyes alive in a way he had never seen before. For the first time, she didn't look trapped. She looked free. Lily tugged gently at Marcus's sleeve, her tiny hand trembling but determined. Her voice, still shaky but filled with hope, whispered, "Sing again." The sound of her request nearly undid David completely. She had spoken not one word, not two, but an entire request. His daughter, who had lived her whole life in silence, was now asking for more. Marcus's grin widened, and without hesitation, he began strumming a brighter melody, one that danced in the air like sunlight on water. The children around them clapped along, and this time, Lily's voice followed. She whispered words here and there, stumbled on some, and laughed at herself when she got them wrong. And then, something even greater happened. She laughed. For the very first time in her life, David heard his daughter laugh out loud. The sound was light, innocent, and pure, and it filled his chest with a joy so powerful it almost hurt. He pressed a trembling hand against his heart as tears blurred his vision. He had imagined this moment so many times, but reality was sweeter than any dream. The other children laughed with her, and soon the whole park seemed alive with her joy. Lily clapped her hands off beat, shouted a shaky bright, and then collapsed into giggles again. Her teddy bear lay forgotten in the grass, because for once, she didn't need to hide behind it. She was part of the world, part of the music, and she was shining. David knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. She didn't resist. She leaned into him, her tiny arms wrapping around his neck, her little voice muffled against his chest as she whispered again, "Daddy." He closed his eyes and let the word wash over him, a word he thought he might never hear. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. When the song ended, David turned back to Marcus, his voice trembling. "You don't understand what you've done. I would give everything I own, everything I have, for this moment. And you gave it to me freely." Marcus shook his head again, his expression calm but kind. "Don't thank me. Thank her. She was ready." Sometimes children don't need pressure, or tests, or money. They need connection. They need someone who sees them, not their silence. David's throat ached with unspoken words. He had spent years chasing cures, searching for answers, when all along, Lily had only needed patience, love, and a little music to feel safe. He looked at Marcus with awe. "Will you keep coming?" To sing with her. Marcus chuckled, his guitar resting across his lap. "If she wants me to, I'll be here. But remember, this isn't about me. It's about you and her. She found her voice today. Don't let her lose it." David nodded, his heart swelling with both gratitude and responsibility. He promised himself then and there that he would never let work, business, or wealth come before his daughter again. No deal, no empire, no amount of money could ever compare to the sound of her voice. Lily tugged at his sleeve and looked up at him with sparkling eyes. "Daddy," she said again, clearer this time. "Sing with me." The words stunned him, but he nodded quickly, his voice breaking with emotion. "Of course, sweetheart. Always." Marcus strummed softly again, and this time David joined in awkwardly, his deep, untrained voice stumbling over the lyrics. But Lily laughed at his clumsy singing, and her laughter was contagious. David laughed too, and for the first time in his life, he felt what true happiness was. Around them, the park carried on, children running, parents chatting. But for David, the world had stopped. In that small circle under the oak tree, with a stranger and a guitar, his life had been rewritten. He wasn't just a millionaire anymore. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a father who had finally heard his daughter's voice. And he knew, without a doubt, that this day would live in his heart forever. From that day forward, David's life changed in ways he never thought possible. The world that once revolved around business meetings, corporate deals, and endless deadlines now spun around a 7-year-old girl whose voice had finally found its way into the world. He no longer measured success by contracts, numbers, or wealth. Success was now measured in the sound of his daughter saying "Daddy" when he walked through the door, or the way her giggles bounced off the walls of their home. Lily, who had once lived in silence, began to blossom like a flower finally reaching for the sun. At first, her words were small and uncertain, often whispered or mumbled into her teddy bear. But each day, they grew stronger. Sometimes it was just a single word, "cookie, son," or book. Other times, she surprised David with entire phrases that made his heart skip a beat. One morning, as he poured her cereal, she looked up and said softly, "Thank you, Daddy." It was so ordinary, so simple, yet to him, it felt like the greatest accomplishment of his life. Marcus, the man with the guitar, didn't disappear after that day in the park. He became more than a passing miracle. He became family. He would visit often, bringing his guitar and a warm smile that always seemed to melt Lily's shyness. Together, they sang songs under the oak tree in the park or in the cozy living room of David's mansion, where the sound of music finally replaced the quiet that had once haunted the house. Marcus never treated Lily like she was broken or fragile. He treated her like a child with endless potential, and Lily flourished under his guidance. David, too, became a student in this new chapter of life. He sat beside his daughter, clapping along to songs, sometimes offbeat, sometimes off-key, but always with a heart full of love. He learned quickly that Lily's progress wasn't about perfect notes or correct words. It was about connection. It was about laughter when they sang too fast, or the way she leaned against him when she grew tired, her little voice humming the last line of a song. The mansion, once filled with the cold echoes of silence, became warm with life. Staff members who had grown used to Lily's quiet demeanor now found themselves smiling as she greeted them with shy words. In fact, he was proud. Every evening became a ritual. Dinner was no longer a silent affair, with clinking silverware and quiet glances. Instead, it was filled with Lily's growing vocabulary, her stories about the park, and her requests for Marcus's songs. Sometimes she would climb onto David's lap and whisper, "Sing with me, Daddy." And even though David's singing voice was clumsy at best, he always obliged. They laughed more than they sang, but that was what made it perfect. The bond between father and daughter grew deeper with each passing day. David cherished the small moments, reading bedtime stories where Lily would timidly read 1 or 2 words, watching her run into his arms shouting "Daddy" when he came home, or simply listening to her hum softly as she played with her toys. These were the treasures no amount of money could ever buy. And Lily, once so quiet and withdrawn, became a child full of light. Her teachers noticed the change, amazed at how quickly she began to interact with classmates. Other parents commented on her progress, but David always smiled quietly, never boasting. He knew it wasn't about showing the world how far she'd come. It was about cherishing every step of her journey. Marcus remained a steady presence, reminding David of a lesson he had learned that day in the park. "Children don't need perfection," Marcus often said. "They just need love, patience, and someone willing to listen." David carried those words in his heart like scripture. The millionaire who once thought money could solve anything had finally learned the truth. Love, patience, and kindness could achieve what no fortune ever could. And though David's wealth remained, it no longer defined him. He was no longer just the businessman with endless contracts and power. He was a father, and his greatest pride was a little girl who had found her voice. There were still challenges, of course. Some days Lily grew frustrated, stumbling over words or retreating into silence when she felt overwhelmed. But instead of panicking or searching for another expert, David simply held her hand and reminded her, "It's okay. I'm right here." And with time, she always tried again. Every time Lily called him Daddy, David remembered that afternoon in the park. He remembered the way his knees nearly gave out at the sound of her voice, the way Marcus had strummed his guitar as if weaving magic into the air, and the way Lily had laughed for the very first time. That moment was carved into his soul forever. Years later, when people asked David about the greatest day of his life, he didn't talk about business deals or achievements. He didn't mention wealth, success, or recognition. He only smiled and said, "The day my daughter spoke her first word, that was the day I became the richest man alive." And every night, as he kissed Lily goodnight and heard her whisper, "I love you, Daddy," David knew it was true. Because no empire, no fortune, no power in the world could ever compare to the priceless gift he had been given, his daughter's voice. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many others need to hear it too. Don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that will make you believe in miracles again. Your support helps us bring more beautiful moments to life.